My sister's housewarming was on a Saturday in October, and I almost didn't go. I had worked a double shift the Friday before, 12 hours on my feet at the distribution center, then 3 more hours doing freelance bookkeeping from my laptop at the kitchen table. My lower back was doing that thing where it stops being pain and just becomes a dull, permanent fact of your body. I was tired in a way that sleep doesn't really fix. But my mom called at 8 that morning before my alarm even went off, and she said, "You have to be there, Lydia. Your sister needs the whole family there." So I went. I want to explain something before I get into the rest of this, because people always ask the same question, and I want to answer it honestly. Why did I keep helping her? Why did I keep showing up? I've thought about this a lot, and the real answer is that I didn't think of it as helping. I thought of it as just what you do. My sister Christine is 4 years older than me. Growing up, she was the one with the plan. She knew what she wanted. She knew how to present herself. She knew how to make people believe in her. I was the quiet one. The one who got good grades but didn't make noise about it. The one who figured things out slowly, privately. When we were teenagers, my dad lost his job at the plant in Dayton. Not a layoff. A full closure. He found work eventually. But for 2 years, things were genuinely scary. Christine was already in college by then, and she called home every Sunday. And every Sunday she told my parents how stressful her classes were, how much pressure she was under, how she needed them to believe in her. My parents would get off the phone and look exhausted in a different way than before. Not financial exhaustion, but emotional. Like they had given something away. I never called. I just started working. I got a job at a pharmacy counter when I was 16. I did bookkeeping for a local mechanic shop at 17 because the owner saw me doing math homework and asked if I knew QuickBooks. I helped pay for groceries without saying anything about it, just leaving cash on the counter like it appeared from somewhere. Christine graduated and moved to Columbus for a marketing job. She made decent money, but she spent it the same way she made it, fast and visibly. Nice apartment, nice clothes, nice restaurants. She posted all of it. Her Instagram looked like a lifestyle brand. A few years later, she met Kevin at a work event. Kevin came from a family with money. Not old money, but enough that he'd never had to think carefully about it. They dated for 2 years, and when they got engaged, Christine decided she wanted to buy a house before the wedding. She said renting was throwing money away. She'd read it somewhere and now it was gospel. The problem was her credit. Christine had 2 credit cards she'd maxed out in her late 20s and a medical bill she'd ignored until it went to collections. She disputed everything, and some of it came off, but her score was still low enough that the bank wouldn't approve her for the mortgage she wanted on her own. Kevin's income looked good on paper, but he had student debt, private loans, the kind with high interest, and the debt-to-income ratio didn't work. She called me on a Tuesday night. She said Kevin's family was expecting them to have a place before the wedding, and she couldn't tell them the truth about the mortgage situation because Kevin didn't fully know about the credit card history, and she was embarrassed. She needed a co-signer, someone with a clean credit history and provable income. That was me. I had spent 9 years being extremely careful with money. I had a 780 credit score. I had a small savings account I'd been building for a down payment on my own place someday. And I had a sister on the phone who was crying, which she didn't do often, and who said, "I'll pay every month, I promise. You won't even know the loan is there. I just need your name on it." My name went on it. The house was $340,000. 4-bedroom colonial in a suburb of Columbus with a 2-car garage and a finished basement. It was more house than they needed and more house than I could have afforded. But it was the house Christine had decided on, and Kevin's parents were apparently delighted. I drove the 40 minutes from Dayton to the closing and signed my name next to Christine's on 11 different pages. I told the loan officer I was the co-signer, that I understood my obligations, that I had read the documents. I had read them. I knew exactly what I was agreeing to. Christine hugged me in the parking lot after and said, "You're the best. I'm going to pay you back for this someday. I mean it." I nodded. I drove home. I didn't tell anyone. For 2 years, she made the payments. Not always on time. Twice I got alerts from the mortgage servicer because the payment was more than a week late, and both times I texted her and she said she'd forgotten or she'd had a cash flow issue, but it was handled. I stopped looking at my phone like a bomb after that. I just tried not to think about it. The housewarming party was in October, 2 years after the closing. They'd spent money on the house. New kitchen appliances, a deck out back, fresh landscaping. It looked like the houses in the lifestyle magazines Christine used to save on her phone. There were maybe 40 people there when I arrived. Kevin's family, their friends from Columbus, some people from Christine's office. I didn't know most of them. I came straight from work. I hadn't had time to change because my shift ran long, and then traffic on 70 was bad. I was wearing dark jeans and a plain sweater. I wasn't dressed up, but I wasn't a disaster. I looked like someone who'd driven 40 minutes after a long week, which is exactly what I was. Christine met me at the door. She looked beautiful. She'd had her hair done and she was wearing a dress I recognized from one of her Instagram stories. She hugged me quickly and then pulled back and looked at me with this expression I'd seen my whole life. The elevator scan up and down, making her assessment. She said, "Oh, Lydia, you couldn't have changed?" I told her I'd come straight from work. She said, quietly, almost whispering, "Kevin's mom is here. His whole family. Can you maybe just stay in the kitchen for a bit? Or by the snack table? I just don't want you to be the first person people notice when they walk in." I stared at her. She had already turned toward another guest. I went to the snack table. I ate a few crackers. I talked to no one because I knew no one, and my sister had just asked me to stay near the food so I wouldn't embarrass her. About an hour in, I heard Christine telling a group of Kevin's relatives about the house. She was in the living room and I was near the doorway, invisible in the way that people standing alone near a doorway always are. She was explaining how she and Kevin had found the place, how she had just known it was the one, how they'd worked so hard to make it theirs. Kevin's aunt said, "It's wonderful. You two did this all on your own. That's impressive these days." And Christine said, "We did. It took everything we had, but we made it work." She did not look at me. She didn't know I was close enough to hear. I set my cup down on the little side table by the door. I thought about leaving. I thought about a lot of things. I didn't leave. I don't know why. Maybe I thought something else was going to happen. Maybe I was just tired and it was easier to stand there than to make the decision to go. Then I heard Kevin say my name from across the room. He was with a small group of people, a few of his friends, and a man I didn't recognize. Kevin waved me over. He was smiling the way he smiled when he was performing being a good person. He said, "Hey, my sister has been asking who did the books for the renovation. I told her you might know something about that." This was Kevin's way of including me without actually including me, pointing out that I work with numbers, useful in a specific, limited way. The man next to him extended his hand. He said his name was Arthur. He was older, maybe mid-50s, calm in the way that people who've been professionally calm for decades tend to be. He said he was in residential lending. Something in my stomach moved. He asked what I did, and I told him I worked in logistics operations and did some freelance accounting on the side. He nodded and said, "Accounting. So you've probably dealt with mortgage documentation before. Cosigners, that kind of thing?" I said yes. I said I had some experience with that. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, "Lydia. Are you the Lydia on the Whitmore mortgage?" The room didn't go quiet because no one else was paying attention. But in the little circle of us, something shifted. Kevin said, "What?" Arthur looked briefly like he wished he hadn't said it, but there was also something careful in his expression, like he had known exactly what he was saying. He said, "I processed this loan 2 years ago, the co-signer on the mortgage. The name on the documents was Lydia Whitmore." He looked at me. "Is that you?" "Whitmore is my last name. Christine took Kevin's name when they married." Kevin turned to me. He said very slowly, "You're on our mortgage?" I said yes. He said, "Since when?" I said, "Since the beginning. Since closing." He looked at Christine. And Christine was standing about 10 feet away, and she had heard everything, and her face had gone the color of the cream-colored walls she picked out herself. Kevin said, "Christine. She said it was complicated. She said she was complicated. She said she was going to explain it. She said I had offered to help and it wasn't a big deal. I had not offered, she had asked." I didn't say that out loud right then. I didn't say anything. I just watched Kevin's face go through a series of expressions that I'd never seen on him before. Confusion, then something harder. Then the deliberate blank look of a person deciding to have this conversation somewhere else. Arthur excused himself. I thought that was probably the right move. I stayed another 20 minutes because I didn't know how to leave gracefully, and then I did leave. And I drove home and I sat in my car in the parking lot of my apartment building for a while before I went inside. Christine called me that night. She was not crying this time. She was cold in a way I wasn't prepared for. She said I had humiliated her in her own home. She said I had chosen the worst possible moment to make everything about myself. She said Arthur probably knew me from somewhere and I had planned it somehow, which didn't even make logical sense, but I didn't point that out. I said I didn't plan anything. I didn't know he would be there. She said, "Why were you even talking to Kevin's friends? You were supposed to stay by the kitchen." I let that sit in the air for a second. Then I said, "Christine, I have been paying your mortgage." She said, "I pay the mortgage." I said, "I have been paying it. 2 months ago and 4 months before that, when you were late, the servicer contacted me because I'm on the loan. Because if you don't pay, it affects me. It has been affecting me for 2 years." She said that was different. That was just technical. I said goodnight. I hung up. I want to tell you what happened next, but I also want to tell you what happened inside of me first, because I think that part matters more. I have spent a lot of my adult life being useful in ways that no one noticed. I don't say that to feel sorry for myself. I genuinely didn't mind most of the time. I'm the kind of person who finds satisfaction in things working, in problems getting solved, in showing up. I told myself I helped Christine because I loved her and because I could and because it was the right thing to do. But sitting in my car that night, I realized something. I had also helped her because some part of me believed that being necessary was the closest I was going to get to being valued. That if I was useful enough, if I was indispensable enough, she would eventually recognize what I'd given. That the debt would mean something. It never did. And I had known that, probably, for a long time. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes when you finally stop pretending you don't know something you've known for years. I slept 12 hours that night. The following Monday, I called my loan officer at the bank I use in Dayton. I explained the situation. I asked what my options were. She walked me through it. Refinancing was the cleanest path, but Christine and Kevin would have to qualify on their own, and given their combined financial history, that wasn't guaranteed. The other option was for me to formally request removal as cosigner, which would trigger a review. If they couldn't get approved without me, they'd need to sell or find another solution. I sent Christine an email, not a text, an email, because I wanted it documented. And I told her I would not be renewing or continuing as cosigner if there was any option to remove myself, and that I was initiating the process through the bank. I told her she had 6 months to refinance. She did not respond to the email. My mom called me 2 days later. She had clearly spoken to Christine. She said I was being cruel. She said family doesn't do this to family. She said the wedding had just happened and I was going to destabilize Christine's marriage. I said, "Mom, I have been a cosigner on Christine's mortgage for 2 years, and she told her in-laws she bought the house herself." There was a long silence. My mom said, "She said you offered." I said, "She called me crying and asked me. I have the text messages." Another silence. I don't know what my mom thought in that silence. I think she was deciding something. I think she was doing the math that she had probably been avoiding for a while, the math of which daughter had been giving and which one had been taking, and what that said about how she'd raised us and what she'd allowed. She said, "I didn't know the details." I said, "I know." We stayed on the phone a little longer, but neither of us said much. When we hung up, I think we both felt something shift. Not repaired, not broken, something in between. The fragile, uncertain weight of a truth that's finally been said out loud. Christine and Kevin refinanced 8 months later. It took longer than 6 months because their first application was denied and they had to get Kevin's parents to help, which I imagine was a conversation I would have paid to hear. When the refinance closed, my name came off the loan. I got the notification from the mortgage servicer on a Wednesday afternoon in between a logistics report and a client call. I was at my desk. I read the email once, then closed it, then sat very still for about 30 seconds. Then I opened my savings account app. For 2 years, I had not touched the money I'd been setting aside for a down payment. I'd been afraid to move it, afraid to spend it, afraid that somehow I'd need it as a buffer for the mortgage situation. That fear had been background noise for 24 months. It was quiet now. I started looking at condos in Dayton the following week. Not the ones Christine would have picked, not the 4-bedroom colonials with the finished basements and the curb appeal. A 2-bedroom on the second floor of a building near Five Rivers Metro Parks with original hardwood floors and south-facing windows that got good light in the afternoon. It needed some updating in the kitchen, but nothing I couldn't manage. I put in an offer on a Friday morning, just my name on the paperwork. The seller accepted by that afternoon. I have not talked to Christine in 8 months. I don't say that as a victory. I say it as a fact. She sent me one message after the refinance closed. It said, "Done, hope you're happy." And I read it and thought about the right thing to say and then didn't say anything because I realized there wasn't a version of a response that would change what had happened or what we were to each other. My mom and I talk every couple of weeks now. It's different, quieter, more honest maybe. She came to see my condo in March and she stood in the kitchen for a while looking at the windows. She said, "This is nice, Lydia. This is really nice." I said, "Thank you." She said, "Did you do this yourself?" I said, "Yes." She didn't say anything else, but she put her hand on my shoulder for a second before she went to look at the other rooms. That was enough. I think about the housewarming sometimes, not with anger anymore, mostly, more like I'm examining something I found in a drawer that I'd forgotten about. I think about standing by the snack table. I think about Standing's face when Arthur said my name. I think about Kevin's expression and the way the room didn't go quiet, but everything in my particular corner of it did. People sometimes ask if I regret co-signing the mortgage. It's a reasonable question. Here's the honest answer. I don't regret the decision I made with the information I had at the time. I made it out of love. Even if that love was tangled up with things that weren't healthy. I don't think I was naive. I think I was hopeful, which is different. Hopeful that being generous would eventually mean something to her. Hopeful that the person I thought she could be was closer to the surface than she was. What I regret is not drawing a line sooner. Not for her sake, for mine. I'm 31 now. I own a condo. I have a savings account that is only for me, that no one else has a claim on, that I don't carry like a responsibility around my neck. I'm finishing an online certification in financial planning because I've spent so long managing everyone else's numbers that I figured I might as well do something with it officially. Last month, someone at work asked me to recommend a good mortgage broker. I gave them Arthur's card. He passed it to me before he left the housewarming, quiet and matter of fact, like he knew I'd need it eventually. I think he did. Some people are just paying attention when everyone else in the room is busy performing. I'm trying to be more like that. I didn't walk out of that housewarming feeling like I'd won anything. I want to be clear about that. There was no triumphant moment where I stood in the middle of Christine's beautiful living room and said everything I'd been holding for 2 years. Arthur said my name. Kevin's face changed, and I stood there quietly while the whole thing unraveled on its own. That's not a victory. That's just what happens when you build something on a lie and then invite the wrong person to the party. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since then. Not in a mystical way, just in the plain, practical sense of actions have consequences, and the consequences don't care how good your Instagram looks. Christine made a series of choices. She borrowed my name and my credit and my silence, and then she decided that made her self-made. She chose to tell her in-laws a version of events that erased me completely. She chose to ask me to stand by the snack table so I wouldn't complicate the story she was telling. Every one of those choices was a small brick in a wall that eventually had to come down. And it came down not because I pushed it, but because it wasn't built on anything solid. What I've had to reckon with is my part in it. Because I had choices too. I chose to sign my name on 11 pages without asking for anything in writing. I chose to absorb the late payment alerts without confronting her. I chose for 2 years to treat my own financial security like it was less important than her comfort. That's not generosity. Or it stopped being generosity at some point and became something else. Something closer to self-erasure. I was so used to being useful in the background that I forgot I was allowed to exist in the foreground. That's the thing about intelligence. Real intelligence. Not just being good at math or knowing how to read a mortgage document. Real intelligence is also knowing your own worth clearly enough that you don't sign it away. I knew how to manage money. I did not for a long time know how to manage my own boundaries with the same precision. Those are different skills, and I had to learn the second one the hard way. And resilience. I used to think resilience meant absorbing more, enduring more, carrying more weight without complaining. I don't think that anymore. What I did after the housewarming, making the call to the bank, writing the email, starting the process to remove my name, that was the resilience, not the 2 years of silence. The decision to stop. Lydia is 31 now. She owns a condo with south-facing windows and her name only on the deed. She is working toward a financial planning certification. She talks to her mom every couple of weeks, and the conversations are quieter and more honest than they used to be. These are not dramatic outcomes. They are just what a life looks like when you stop spending your energy on people who've made it clear they don't intend to see you. If you are holding someone else's ceiling up while your own floor is caving in, I'm not going to tell you what to do. But I will tell you that the moment I put my name on my own front door instead of someone else's was the first time in years I slept without that low, constant hum of dread. That's not a lesson. That's just what happened.